It was the kind of Christmas evening that begged to be photographed. String lights blinked gently against the living room windows. The fireplace crackled like applause, and the tree stood tall in the corner, haloed in gold. Emma adjusted the turkey platter one last time, brushing imaginary crumbs from the lace runner. Her daughters, Haley and Brooke, giggled on the couch in matching red flannel pajamas, half watching a Hallmark movie, half scrolling through their phones. Across the room, Greg, her husband of 22 years, reclined in his favorite chair, one socked foot resting over the other, sipping wine. The dog lay curled beneath him, its tail twitching now and then in sleep. Dinner was perfect, Greg announced, stretching his arms above his head with the lazy smugness of a king satisfied with his feast. Ladies, let's do gifts. Haley and Brooke squealed in sync. They rushed to the base of the tree, sorting through the carefully wrapped packages Emma had prepared, meticulously labeled, color-coded, coordinated bows. Dad, this one says from Mom and Dad, Brooke said, shaking a box. Ah, Greg chuckled. Pretty sure that's more Mom than me. I wouldn't know what you girls even like anymore. Emma smiled faintly, but said nothing. She had memorized their clothing sizes, favorite scents, the exact lip gloss shades they used. She knew Haley liked her hoodies oversized and that Brooke hated socks with seams. The gifts unwrapped with gleeful chaos, tissue paper flying, ribbons unraveling, gasps and squeals. Laughter filled the room like warm cocoa. Greg stood and stretched again. One more gift, he said, reaching into his back pocket. He pulled out a crisp $100 bill and handed it to each daughter. Just because. Thanks, Dad. Haley leapt up and hugged him. Brooke followed, grinning. Then he turned to Emma. Oh, and for you. He patted his pocket again and came up with a $20 bill, folded in half. He held it out with a shrug. I know you've been tight lately. Buy yourself something nice. Emma froze, the plate of cookies in her hand suddenly too heavy. The room dimmed, just slightly. She took the money, slowly. Thank you, she murmured, tucking it into her apron pocket. Brooke looked up from her phone and snorted. Mom doesn't need a gift. She doesn't even work. Haley chimed in, eyes never leaving the screen. Right? Dad pays for everything. The plate slipped from Emma's fingers and landed with a dull clatter on the counter. She didn't speak. Not yet. Greg laughed, awkward. Now, girls, be nice. But it's true, Brooke insisted. Mom's home all day. What's so hard about doing laundry and cooking? Emma's hands gripped the counter edge. Haley stood, walking toward her. Seriously, Mom, I mean, thanks for dinner and all, but maybe next year try pitching in on the presents. You're always stressed about money, but never contribute. The words sliced, not yelled, not cruel on the surface, just casual, assumed, accepted. Emma turned slowly to look at her daughters, then at Gregorian. His wine glass was half empty. His eyes were fixed on the fireplace. I see, she said softly. Greg shifted. Don't get all emotional, Em. It's Christmas. She nodded almost imperceptibly. It is. She looked toward the stairs. She looked toward the attic. No one noticed the flicker in her eyes, the way her shoulders pulled back, not in defeat, but in decision. The laughter resumed, but in Emma's mind, another sound rose louder, the quiet shuffle of paper, the thick envelope tucked between winter coats in a box labeled Old Ornaments. Inside it, 12 years of receipts, ledgers, payment stubs, the mortgage, every cent of it, paid, by her, alone. Long before she became invisible in her own home, Emma had a name that meant something outside those four walls. Once she had been Emma Monroe, the quiet genius in her college linguistics program, the girl who translated Latin texts for extra cash and corrected her professor's grammar with a smile. She was the one people called when they needed polish, precision, or poetic phrasing. Even then, she knew how to make the most complex things feel effortless. And then came Greg. He was charming in a Midwestern boy-next-door way, grateful to have landed a smart girl and quick to suggest, just after they married, that she didn't really need to work anymore. We don't both need the stress, he'd said gently. You'll just end up tired and resentful. Stay home, raise the kids. I'll handle the rest. Emma hadn't been sure, but when Haley was born, the decision made itself. Her baby needed her, and so she gave herself to motherhood with full devotion. Diapers and bottles and lullabies filled the space where academic journals and syllabi once lived. Over time, she fell into a rhythm. The caretaker, the cook, the errand runner, the calendar holder. It was exhausting, but also grounding. At least at first. But one winter, when Brooke was 2 and Haley had just started kindergarten, Emma opened their online bank account and froze. Overdraft. She hadn't realized how thin Greg's salary had become. He hadn't mentioned it. He never did. When she asked, he waved her off. It's just timing. I've got it handled. But she knew the math. And she knew Greg had no handle on anything. That night, she stayed up until 2 a.m., sipping cold coffee and scanning Craigslist under a fake name. The next day, she started her first remote gig, editing blog posts for a marketing firm in Chicago. It paid $12 an hour. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't steady, but it was something. Over the years, she added more jobs. She transcribed legal hearings for a court reporting agency, translated emails from English to Spanish for a boutique design firm in LA, ghostwrote romance novellas for an indie publisher who always paid late, but always paid. She worked in the slivers of time no one else noticed, between ballet drop-offs and dentist appointments, after the laundry and before dinner. At night, after Greg snored himself into oblivion, she pulled out her laptop and typed until her wrists ached. No one asked why her eyes were always red. No one noticed her knuckles stiffened from typing through early arthritis. She made $200 the first month, then $400. By year 3, she was clearing over $1,200 a month, every cent funneled into a savings account Greg didn't know about. Then she called the mortgage lender. "Can I pay directly against the principal?" she asked. The man on the phone paused. "Ma'am, that's not very common." "I didn't ask what's common. I asked what's possible." From that moment forward, she made extra payments every month, tiny ones, then medium ones. Some months she barely scraped by, and others she sent $800. She kept it quiet, secret, sacred. Greg still thought the house was being paid by automatic withdrawals from his paycheck. He never checked the details. As long as the lights were on and the fridge was full, he assumed all was fine. He assumed wrong. Emma wasn't just covering part of the mortgage. Over the years, she'd come to cover all of it. Greg had long since adjusted his direct deposit to his personal checking account. "Simpler this way," he'd said. "Less math for you." And she had smiled and nodded because it meant he was out of her way. Haley and Brooke never asked where the food came from, or how the bills were paid, or why they always had clean clothes and working Wi-Fi. Emma made everything seem seamless, and in doing so, she erased herself from the credit. That was her mistake. She thought humility was grace. She thought sacrifice was love. She didn't realize silence had an expiration date, and now her daughters thought she contributed nothing, that she just stayed home, that Greg's $20 pity gift was more than she'd earned. She remembered the night Haley broke her wrist in 3rd grade. Emma had driven through a blizzard to get her to the ER, while Greg slept through his alarm. She remembered the time Brooke was too anxious to go to middle school after a bullying incident. Emma had sat with her for 3 days straight, creating flashcards and courage. She remembered every fever, every tear, every birthday cake. And they remembered none of it. All they saw was who handed them gifts wrapped in shiny paper, not who paid the mortgage that kept the roof over their heads. The next morning, the wrapping paper still littered the living room like confetti after a parade, only this one wasn't celebrating her. Emma knelt to pick up the crumpled scraps alone while her family enjoyed leftovers and video games. She stared at a piece of gift wrap with gold stars and muttered, "Stars for everyone, except me." Upstairs, Greg was snoring. The girls were locked in their rooms. Nobody had even said thank you for the meal. Not once. Emma straightened slowly, her knees popping in protest. She glanced at the attic door in the hallway ceiling. It was time. She grabbed the step stool and pulled the cord. The ladder unfolded with a creak. A small dust cloud puffed into the air as she climbed into the space where she kept the remnants of a life everyone had forgotten. Cardboard boxes were stacked like small tombstones. One read, "Christmas decor," another, "Baby shoes," and then the one she needed. It was labeled in her neat handwriting, "EM Payments." She pulled it out and opened it. Inside were 12 manila envelopes, each dated and sealed. She cracked one open. Inside, a money order receipt. $500 to principal mortgage reduction. Another envelope. $675 labeled March extra payment. Another. $830 from a bulk editing job. She stayed up 4 nights to finish before the deadline. She kept going. Envelopes and receipts, printouts and payment confirmations, even thank you notes from her rare, high-paying clients. All of it here. All of it hers. No one in that house had any idea. She brought the entire box downstairs and laid the papers out across the dining table like a deck of cards. Her hand, finally revealed. At 6 p.m., Greg came downstairs, scratching his chest and yawning. "What's all this?" he asked, eyeing the documents. Emma didn't flinch. "These are mortgage receipts." He laughed lightly. "Yeah, I figured. We pay those online now, babe. You don't have to keep hard copies." She looked up slowly. "Number, I pay those online. You haven't contributed in 5 years." He blinked. "What are you talking about?" Emma stood, lifting one envelope and slapping it onto the pile. 2017, when you said your check was short and asked if I could cover just 1 month. Another slap. 2018, when you bought that car and said we had to tighten belts for a while. And again. 2019, when you forgot to set up the auto payment and we nearly defaulted. You blamed the bank. Greg frowned, suddenly defensive. Okay. So you helped. Why are you making this a big deal?" "I didn't help, Greg. I paid. The entire mortgage, every month, for the last 6 years." He looked genuinely stunned. "That's not possible." She laughed, bitter, hollow. "That's because you never asked. You never noticed. You assumed I was just clipping coupons and boiling spaghetti." Haley came down the stairs, earbuds dangling. "Mom, are you yelling?" Emma turned to her. "Do you know who pays for this house?" "Dad, obviously," Haley said, confused. "No," Emma replied. "Not for a long time." Haley narrowed her eyes. "You mean, like, recently?" "I mean since you were in 8th grade." Haley blinked. "You're lying." Emma said nothing. Instead, she picked up the largest envelope and opened it. From inside, she pulled out a thick document, neatly stapled, notarized. "Here," she said, "the payoff confirmation, the final balance, the deed. This house is paid off." Greg muttered, "Wait, what?" "I finished it last month," Emma said. "Every cent came from the jobs you mocked, the jobs you said were a waste of time. This house? It's mine." Haley's voice rose. "Wait, what do you mean, yours?" "I refinanced 3 years ago in my name alone. Greg didn't notice when I had him sign the paperwork. He thought it was for home insurance. I did everything, quietly, while you all rolled your eyes and laughed at me." Greg's voice cracked. "You tricked me?" "No," she said calmly. "You ignored me." Brooke had joined them now, standing at the stairs with a bag of chips in her hand, frozen in place. Haley's eyes filled with tears, not of regret, but disbelief. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I thought one day, maybe, you'd love me without needing a receipt." Greg stared at the table, his face red with something he couldn't name. Emma turned her gaze back to the envelope pile. "But now, I'm making sure you remember." She walked to the front door, opened it wide, and stood there for a long moment, staring into the cold. "You all thought I was nothing because I didn't have a paycheck stub to wave around," she said over her shoulder. "But I own this house. Alone. And it's the last Christmas I'll ever spend inside it with people who think I earned nothing." And then, quietly, she closed the door behind her. The door shut with a soft click, but the silence that followed inside the house was deafening. Greg stood motionless by the dining table, eyes scanning the documents again as if they'd rearranged themselves into a lie that comforted him. "She's bluffing," he muttered. This has to be fake or exaggerated. Haley sat on the bottom step, staring down at her hands. Brooke was still in the hallway, holding the now forgotten chips. She just walked out, Brooke whispered. No, Greg growled. She's making a scene, like always. She'll come back once she cools off. But Emma didn't. By midnight, the dishes were still in the sink. The leftovers sat untouched. The fireplace had gone out. Greg finally texted, "Come home." Enough drama. Emma didn't reply. At 3 a.m., Haley knocked softly on her bedroom door before remembering it was empty. She stood there awkward and cold in her pajama shorts. In the morning, Greg found the stove spotless, the floors still gleaming from the cleaning Emma had done before the holiday. He opened the fridge. No breakfast. No coffee on the counter. No gentle music from the radio. Just absence, thick and suffocating. By noon, Margaret, their grandmother, called to check on how Christmas went. Greg, who had spent the morning stewing in the living room, picked up with a huff. She walked out. "What do you mean, walked out?" Margaret asked, sharp. "She's claiming she paid off the house," he muttered. "Says it's hers." There was a long silence. Then, "Well, is she wrong?" "Mom, don't take her side." "I'm not taking sides," she said. "I'm asking if she's wrong." Greg hung up without replying, but later that afternoon, he called her back. "Can you come stay for a bit?" By dinner, Margaret was in the kitchen, stirring sauce with a heavy hand. "Where's Emma?" she asked, scanning the pantry. "Gone," Brooke said simply. "Why?" Margaret pressed. Haley's voice cracked. "Because we didn't give her a gift." Margaret frowned. "That's silly. She's your mother." "She also paid the mortgage," Brooke said flatly. Margaret's hand paused mid-stir. "You mean helped?" she said. "No," Haley murmured. "All of it." Margaret's face darkened, but she said nothing more. 3 days passed. Emma didn't return. On the fourth morning, a man in a suit arrived at the door with a thick envelope. Greg opened it, already irritable. "What now?" "Serving notice," the man said. "Division of assets. Legal petitions inside." Greg tore it open and scanned the first page, his face draining of color. The title, "Petition for Full Ownership and Formal Separation of Property." He muttered, "She's serious?" Haley and Brooke stood behind him in the hall. "She's actually leaving you?" Brooke asked. Greg nodded, silent. Haley looked away. "We thought she was just bluffing." "No," Greg said, voice flat. "Your mother doesn't bluff. She endures, until she doesn't." That evening, Margaret made pork chops, the kind Emma used to make. Nobody touched them. Later, Greg found Brooke in the garage, rummaging through bins. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I'm looking for Mom's toolbox." Greg frowned. "Why?" "She fixed my shelf every time it leaned. It's leaning again." Greg sighed. "I'll take a look at it." Brooke shook her head. "No offense, Dad, but you don't even know where we keep light bulbs." He didn't argue. He couldn't, because she was right. The motel room was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that didn't offer peace. It just reminded you of what you left behind. Emma sat on the edge of the bed, her knees drawn up to her chest, a worn notebook in her lap. She wasn't journaling. Not exactly, just remembering in ink. She had started this notebook 12 years ago when she picked up her first freelance job. The first page held her goals in tidy bullet points. Pay off credit card, save $5,000, pay down principal on mortgage. Keep it secret. Back then, it felt almost like a game, a private mission. She'd told herself it was about pride, about proving she wasn't just a housewife. But in truth, it started because of fear. She remembered the day she overheard Greg on the phone with a friend. "Emma? Oh, she's home. You know how it is. She doesn't really work, just manages the house." It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. That tone of casual dismissal. The same one his mother used when referring to Emma's cooking. "Well, at least she makes herself useful." Emma's mother-in-law had never liked her. "Too bookish," she'd said once. not soft enough to be a homemaker, not sharp enough to make money. And then there was Emma's own family. Growing up, she was the inconvenient child, the unexpected daughter sandwiched between two brothers who were treated like royalty. She washed dishes while her older brother studied. She changed diapers for her younger sibling while her parents praised her reliability. When she won a citywide essay contest, no one came to the ceremony. "They probably gave it to you because they felt sorry for you," her mother had said. By the time she met Greg in college, Emma was already conditioned to be quiet, grateful, non-confrontational. Greg had loved that about her. "I can breathe around you," he said once, cradling her face. "You don't start drama like other girls." She thought it was a compliment. At the time, maybe it was. She remembered their first apartment, small, cramped, drafty. But he made her laugh. He cooked with her. When she got pregnant, he cried and said he'd be the best father on earth. But then, the grind began. The pink onesies, the midnight feedings, the unpaid bills. Greg began to harden. He no longer wanted to cook. He came home, dropped his keys on the table, and said, "What's for dinner?" He stopped asking about her day. He stopped noticing when she cried. She remembered the first time she asked for money. "I need $300 for Haley's daycare." Greg had blinked at her. "Can't you just figure it out?" So she did. She sold a piece of her wedding jewelry. Quietly, no one noticed. That was the beginning of her financial exile and her personal resurrection. Emma turned to another page of her notebook. It listed the milestones. First $1,000 saved, first full month of mortgage paid alone. 5 years without missing a single payment. She wrote all of it down. Not for praise, but to remind herself she existed, because no one else did. Her children used to cling to her legs, beg her to stay 5 more minutes at bedtime, cry when she left them at school. Now they rolled their eyes when she asked about their day. Haley barely spoke unless she wanted money. Brooke stopped saying thank you sometime after middle school. They didn't hate her. That would have been easier to process. No, they simply dismissed her, as if her presence was furniture. Functional, silent, unimportant. Emma closed the notebook and stared at the ceiling. She had stayed in the marriage not because she was too weak to leave, but because she believed it would be worth it, that the sacrifices would matter. But now she saw it clearly. Her labor had been consumed, not cherished. Her love had been convenient, not reciprocated. And worst of all, her silence had been mistaken for insignificance. No more. She rose from the bed, walked to the tiny kitchenette, and brewed herself a cup of cheap motel coffee. It was bitter, thin, but it was hers. For the first time in a decade, she didn't have to serve anyone else. She didn't have to wear a smile, or clean up a mess, or ask permission. For the first time since she became someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's background, Emma Monroe was just herself, and that was enough. On the 7th day of Emma's absence, Greg showed up at the motel. He didn't knock gently. He pounded, 3 sharp, demanding raps. Emma opened the door, calm and composed in a clean blouse, jeans, and the same quiet strength she wore like armor. Greg barely looked at her face before pushing his way in. "This is ridiculous," he barked. "Enough already. You've made your point." Emma let the door close behind him. She didn't offer him coffee. She didn't ask him to sit. "I didn't leave to prove a point," she said. "I left because I was done being erased." Greg scoffed, pacing. "You paid off the house. Congratulations. We should be celebrating, not fighting." Emma folded her arms. "You didn't even know it was happening." "Well, I do now," he snapped. "So what do you want? Applause? A parade?" "I wanted respect," she said quietly. "But now I want distance." Greg's voice rose. "This is insane. You want to throw away our whole marriage over What? A misunderstanding?" Emma tilted her head. "A misunderstanding? You let our daughters believe I was a leech. You laughed when they mocked me. You gave your mother more money than you ever handed me, then called me ungrateful when I asked for groceries." Greg ran a hand through his thinning hair. "You're being dramatic." "No," she said. "I'm being honest. Something none of you ever taught our daughters." He paused, then softened. "Emma, come on. Look, the girls miss you. Brooke won't eat. Haley's been crying. You made your point. Let's just move forward." Emma's gaze hardened. "You mean, pretend it didn't happen?" Greg stepped closer. "Let's go home." She took a breath. "There is no home. Not for me." His eyes flashed. "Are you serious right now? You'd give all this up just to prove you're right?" "I already was right," she said. "And I'm not giving anything up. I own that house. I paid for it." Greg scoffed. "You wouldn't dare kick us out." Emma's voice dropped to a calm, razor-edged whisper. "Watch me." For a moment, they stared at each other. Two people who had once held hands in the hospital delivery room, now standing like strangers on opposite sides of a courtroom that didn't yet exist. Greg tried one last tactic. "You'll ruin the girls. They need you." "No," Emma said. "They needed me. I was there. And you all trained them to believe I was nothing." "They're kids. They're old enough to know better." Greg threw up his hands. "So what now? Divorce? Lawyers? Courtroom drama? What, you want spousal support too?" Emma's mouth twitched, not into a smile, into something colder. "I don't want a dime," she said, "but I'm taking back every inch of my dignity." He stepped back, visibly shaken by her certainty. "You'll be alone," he said, almost like a warning. Emma didn't flinch. "I've been alone for years. You just filled the room." She moved past him, opened the door, and held it wide. "This conversation is over. The next time we speak, it'll be through attorneys." Greg looked at her like he didn't recognize her. That was the point. Emma didn't slam the door when he left. She let it click shut, softly, decisively. It was the sound of finality. At first, they thought she'd come back. The house still looked the same. Same furniture, same curtains, same fridge magnets Emma had collected from flea markets. But something had shifted. The scent of lavender, which used to drift from the laundry room, was gone. The bathroom didn't have fresh towels. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was vacant, hollow. Greg stood over the stove on a Tuesday morning, squinting at a frying pan. He cracked 2 eggs directly into it and watched them cling and burn. "Damn it," he muttered, scraping the char into the sink. He hadn't realized how much Emma used to do until she stopped doing it. The dishwasher didn't load itself. The grocery list didn't magically refill. He forgot to refill Brooke's inhaler prescription, and the pharmacy called 3 times before canceling it altogether. He tried calling Emma, twice. Both times, the line rang until it went to voicemail. Meanwhile, Margaret took charge with the precision of a military general. "I'll handle dinner," she said confidently, opening a pack of frozen drumsticks. "This house will not fall apart." That night, dinner was late and undercooked. Brooke picked at her plate, then quietly made instant noodles in the microwave. Haley didn't eat at all. Margaret snapped, "Back in my day, we didn't act like little princesses. You eat what's served." "Back in your day," Haley murmured, "you weren't raised by a ghost." No one replied. The calendar on the kitchen wall remained stuck on December. No one changed it to January. No one dared. Without Emma's presence, time had stalled. Haley's room was cluttered with laundry she didn't know how to separate. On day 5 of Emma's absence, she pulled a white hoodie from the dryer, now tinted a sickly blue from her denim shorts. Brooke snapped at her for hogging the bathroom. Greg forgot to pay the water bill, again. Even their dog, Buster, began to act strangely. He sat by the front door every evening, tail twitching, waiting, expecting. Emma had always fed him before dinner. Now he waited in vain. The quiet chaos slowly peeled the family apart, layer by layer. But it wasn't just the chores they noticed. It was her care. One night, Haley sat in her room scrolling through old photos. One popped up from 5 years ago, her 13th birthday. A homemade cake shaped like a violin, her favorite instrument at the time. She stared at the picture for a long moment. She remembered how Emma had spent 2 days perfecting the icing, staying up late watching YouTube tutorials. How proud she'd looked when Haley smiled. And how, that same year, Haley had called her so embarrassing in front of friends because she cried during the recital. Now that memory made her chest ache. Brooke, too, began to unravel. She found Emma's old to-do list stuck in a drawer, written in her elegant handwriting. It was simple. Renew library cards, bake banana bread for Haley's study group, call insurance about vision coverage, buy Brooke a new sketchbook. The last one had a check mark next to it. Brooke touched the ink and whispered. She remembered? She pulled Greg aside that night. Why did you never tell us Mom worked? Greg shrugged. She said she didn't want anyone to know. She liked her privacy. Brooke frowned. Or maybe you just didn't ask. He didn't answer. The final crack came when Haley tried to organize the bills and found that not only had the car insurance lapsed, but Greg's credit card was maxed, and a magazine subscription was draining $19.99 every month. She made this look so easy, Haley muttered. Margaret rolled her eyes. Don't glorify her now. She walked out on you girls. No, Grandma, Haley said, voice steady. We drove her out. Brooke nodded, voice barely above a whisper. We didn't even get her a gift, after everything. Margaret bristled. Mothers don't need gifts. They need to sacrifice. Haley's eyes flashed. She did sacrifice. She sacrificed everything. We just pretended not to notice. The conversation ended in silence. The next morning, a man in a suit rang the doorbell. Greg opened it in a bathrobe, bleary-eyed. Mr. Caldwell? The man asked. You've been served. He handed over a thick envelope, Emma's official petition for divorce. Inside was everything: legal division of property, request for full ownership of the house, financial release from Greg's debts. Greg scanned the documents, his face pale. She's not bluffing. Haley, standing nearby, whispered, She really meant it? Greg didn't speak. He sat down slowly at the kitchen table where Emma used to sip coffee and do crossword puzzles. She's gone, he finally said, for real. And this time, no one tried to stop her. Emma moved into the furnished apartment on the edge of town. It was nothing special. 2 bedrooms, beige carpet, the kind of place most people forget the moment they leave. But to her, it was freedom. She stood in the middle of the living room on her first morning, still in pajamas, sipping coffee that wasn't for anyone else. No one to serve, no one to clean up after, no one's mood to manage. It was so quiet she could hear herself breathing, and she smiled. Her new job wasn't glamorous. She cleaned houses, real cleaning, with gloves and elbow grease and the satisfaction of leaving something better than she found it. The money wasn't much, but it was hers. Each dollar earned with dignity, each callus a receipt of her own value. One of her clients was a woman named Teresa, a widow in her 60s with a cluttered home and a generous heart. Teresa liked to talk, mostly about old recipes and lost husbands, but she also listened. You ever been to the coast? Teresa asked one afternoon, handing Emma a glass of lemonade. Emma shook her head. Never had the time. Teresa raised a brow. Make time now. You've got the rest of your life, don't you? Emma didn't answer, but the question stayed with her. She started walking in the evenings, a habit she'd abandoned years ago. The rhythm of her feet on pavement soothed something raw inside her. She'd pass other walkers, dog owners, retirees, young couples, and nod politely. Sometimes, she imagined what they saw when they looked at her. A woman finally unburdened, even if her back still remembered the weight. One afternoon, she stopped by a local bookstore. She hadn't bought a book for herself in years. The smell of paper, the hush of turning pages, it brought tears to her eyes. She bought 2 novels and a journal. That night she wrote, Day 36 of Living Alone. My piece is no longer a whisper, it's a voice. Emma didn't miss her old house. She missed some moments. Haley's baby giggle, Brooke's art projects spread across the table, but not the life that smothered her. What she missed most, oddly, was the version of herself she used to be before she became wife, mother, provider, ghost. But slowly she was resurrecting that woman. She started attending a weekly yoga class, not for fitness, though the stretches helped, but for the stillness, the permission to just be. She also reconnected with an old college friend, Denise, now a counselor. They met for lunch one Saturday and ended up talking for 3 hours. "You were always the most brilliant one in our class," Denise said, stirring her tea. We all knew it. Emma looked down at her chipped nails, then back up, eyes steady. "I used to be. I'm working on being her again." Denise smiled. "You already are." By month 2, Emma had applied for a part-time remote editing role with a small academic journal. When she got the offer email, she laughed out loud, then cried. It wasn't just about money. It was proof. She was still sharp, still capable, still here. Back at her old house, Greg was selling his car. Margaret had moved into a senior apartment complex. Haley was skipping meals. Brooke had lost interest in her art. The girls had sent Emma texts, some angry, some regretful, some that simply said, "Hi." She didn't respond right away. She wanted to reply with who she was now, not the woman who used to say yes out of obligation, but the woman who now said yes with purpose. One evening, she stood by the window of her apartment and watched the sun set over the rooftops. She held her journal in one hand, her other cradling a cup of chamomile tea. She wrote, "Freedom isn't loud. It doesn't scream. It's the sound of no one asking when dinner's ready." The knock came just after sunset, soft, hesitant, and utterly unexpected. Emma, fresh from the shower and wrapped in her robe, paused with a cup of tea halfway to her lips. She wasn't expecting anyone. She rarely had visitors. She peeked through the peephole. It was Haley. Emma hesitated. Her heart fluttered, not from joy, but from the muscle memory of old wounds. Still, she opened the door. Haley stood there, smaller than Emma remembered, her hoodie too large, her eyes rimmed red. "Hi," she whispered. Emma stepped aside. "Come in." Haley walked in slowly, her eyes scanning the modest apartment, the books on the shelf, the single-framed photo of Emma at the beach, the smell of lavender and lemon, everything clean, everything calm. "It's nice," she said. Emma nodded. "Thank you." Haley sat down on the edge of the couch like it might bite her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Haley pulled something from her bag, an envelope. She handed it over, eyes downcast. Emma opened it. Inside were printouts, screenshots, bank statements. "I found them," Haley said. "All the mortgage payments, the freelance invoices, the translation contracts. I dug through everything." Emma's fingers gripped the papers lightly. She didn't speak. "I didn't know," Haley said, tears pooling. "I didn't want to know. It was easier to believe what Dad said, that you didn't contribute, that you were just tired and moody all the time." Emma sat across from her, voice even. "You believed that because you wanted to." Haley nodded slowly. "I did." A long silence stretched between them, thick, uncomfortable, and necessary. "Why didn't you tell me?" Haley finally asked. Emma met her eyes. "Because I was hoping someone would see me without needing a receipt." Haley wiped her cheek with her sleeve. "I see you now." Emma's chest ached, not from guilt or forgiveness, but from the weight of those words arriving too late. "I don't know how to fix this," Haley whispered. "You can't," Emma said gently. "Some things aren't meant to be fixed, only understood." Haley looked at her mother, not as a background figure or emotional dumping ground, but as a woman, a full, layered, complicated woman. "Do you still love me?" she asked. Emma closed her eyes briefly. "Yes, but I'm learning to love myself more." Haley nodded slowly. "I won't ask you to come back. I know that's not fair. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." Emma studied her daughter, the way her lip trembled, the way her fingers fidgeted in her lap. There was sincerity there, and sorrow, and shame. It wasn't enough to undo everything, but it was something. "I'm glad you came," Emma said, and I'm glad you're starting to see. Just don't mistake that for an invitation to reset the story. I'm not going back. Haley stood, quiet and subdued. I understand. As she reached the door, she turned back. If you ever want to talk. I'm here. Emma nodded once. After she left, Emma sat with the envelope in her lap for a long time. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just breathed. Because sometimes survival isn't about what comes back. It's about who doesn't. Spring arrived like a whisper. Quiet, green, persistent. Emma stood outside the courthouse, the final divorce decree in her hand. The papers were light. The meaning was not. The house was officially hers. Sole ownership, finalized, non-negotiable. Greg had fought it half-heartedly, filed a counterclaim, claimed emotional distress, pleaded with her lawyer in emails thick with wounded pride. But when the judge asked for evidence of financial contribution, Greg had nothing but excuses and anecdotal bravado. Emma had receipts. When the gavel came down, there was no drama, just an ending. 1 week later, Emma visited the house, not to move back in, but to walk through it one last time before she decided what to do with it. The door creaked open. Dust floated in sunbeams, slicing through half-drawn blinds. It was quiet. She walked through each room, the kitchen she once cleaned on autopilot, the living room where the girls used to color on the rug, her bedroom where she had lain awake for too many nights, wondering if her silence made her weak. Now it made her untouchable. In the hallway, she paused at a spot where a growth chart was still faintly visible, tiny pencil marks that measured height and time and care. She smiled faintly, ran her hand across the wall, and turned toward the door. She had already scheduled a property manager to oversee it. Maybe she'd rent it out. Maybe she'd sell. But she would never live here again. Back at her apartment, a letter waited in the mailbox. No return address, but she recognized the handwriting. It was from Brooke. Inside, folded neatly, was a drawing, pencil sketch, of Emma. She stood tall, expression unreadable, surrounded by tiny objects, the coffee mug, the books, the broom, the laptop. Every detail Brooke had ever quietly noticed. Below it, 2 words written carefully in cursive. Thank you. Emma sat down slowly, tears rising but not spilling. She wasn't sure if Brooke would ever say more, but maybe she didn't have to. Some apologies didn't need pages. Later that week, Emma took Teresa's advice. She went to the coast. The air was salted and brisk. The waves broke with relentless clarity. She stood on the wet sand, her shoes off, toes sinking in. A young couple nearby chased their child through the tide foam. A little boy laughed. Emma watched them, not with envy but with distance. Her time for that season had passed. She pulled out her journal. I am no longer the footnote in my own story. I am the author, the headline. The spine behind her, her phone buzzed. A text from Denise. Your essay got accepted. They want to publish it in the spring issue. Emma smiled, the ocean breeze tugging at her scarf. She had more words to write, more work to do, more life to live. She tossed her phone back in her bag and stepped into the waves, ankle deep. They had once said housewives didn't earn gifts, but Emma Monroe had paid off a mortgage, raised 2 daughters, rebuilt her life, and now stood with the tide rising around her feet, not waiting to be rescued. She had rescued herself.